They told us she was the safest place we'd ever be. The womb, the mother's arms, the softness of her voice, the warmth of her presence. From the very beginning, we learned to equate love with safety, and safety with surrender. But what if the very thing that made us feel most secure was also the thing that planted the seed of our deepest imprisonment? This is the contradiction we never question. The mother is the giver of life, the nurturer of our first breath, and yet she may also be the architect of our emotional cage. Psychologically, we're not just born to a person. We're born into a pattern. Carl Jung called it the great mother archetype, a primal symbol representing both life-giving care and suffocating control. She is the one who nourishes us, but she is also the one who demands our dependence. And in that dependence, something subtle begins to fracture. At first, we are innocent. We cry, and she answers. We fall, and she lifts. But slowly, we begin to sense the price of that comfort: approval in exchange for obedience. Belonging in exchange for silence. Security, as long as we stay small. And that is where the first wound forms, not on the skin, but in the psyche. A voice that says, if you want to be loved, you must never grow dangerous. You must never grow free. Erich Fromm described it as the fear of freedom itself. He argued that many of us secretly don't want to be liberated because freedom is cold and uncertain, while comfort is warm and predictable. And so we choose to remain inside the cocoon, not realizing it's no longer nurturing us, it's consuming us. We don't see it because we're conditioned not to. The mother becomes the symbol of goodness. To question her is to question love itself. So instead, we project her spirit onto everything around us. We seek her in our governments, in our institutions, in our ideologies, always searching for something to cradle us, to tell us we're okay, to rock us gently back into unconsciousness. But in doing so, we carry the same wound into adulthood, the same desire to be held, not challenged, to be comforted, not awakened. And that need makes us easy to control. Because the world is full of surrogate mothers, systems that promise protection in exchange for our passivity. What we don't realize is that every time we retreat into comfort, we tighten the grip of the first embrace. What once held us with love now holds us with fear. And until we confront that, the soft tyranny of dependency, we will keep mistaking obedience for peace. The first wound isn't the pain of being unloved. It's the pain of being loved conditionally and mistaking that condition for truth. But this dynamic doesn't end with our childhood. In fact, it's only just beginning. Because as we grow, the world itself steps in to continue the embrace. The next question we must ask is this: what if the very systems we trust are simply extensions of that same maternal force, designed not to free us, but to keep us comfortably asleep? Once the real mother withdraws, society steps in to finish the job. But this new mother doesn't wear an apron. She wears a uniform, a logo, and a smile. She speaks through headlines, through advertising jingles, through well-mannered experts on softly lit screens. And her message is the same one we've always heard. Trust me. I'll keep you safe. Just don't ask too many questions. What we're taught to call civilization could just as easily be called domestication. From the moment we can walk, systems surround us: school bells, national flags, social rituals, all carefully arranged to replicate the emotional choreography of early maternal comfort. Education rewards obedience. Entertainment numbs rebellion. Media strokes our fears, then sells us the illusion of control. It's a seamless extension of the maternal model. Offer reassurance in exchange for self-abandonment. Louis Althusser described this system as the ideological state apparatus, a structure of institutions that doesn't coerce through violence, but through belief. We don't need to be forced into conformity. We desire it, because we've been trained to associate emotional discomfort with danger, and familiarity with truth. The same way a child will cling to a lie if it means staying close to the mother. The adult clings to ideologies that soothe rather than disrupt. Horkheimer and Adorno warned us about this in their critique of mass culture, that entertainment had become a pacifier for the modern soul, teaching us not how to think, but how to not think. Television, advertising, even political discourse, all designed not to elevate consciousness, but to domesticate it. Not to wake us up, but to keep us emotionally regulated. Imagine a child sitting inches from a glowing screen, mesmerized, not by the content but by the comfort of it. The glow doesn't enlighten, it sedates. And in that sedation, a quiet agreement is made. As long as you don't make me feel fear, I won't ask you for the truth. This is the deeper architecture of dependence. The mother-child dynamic is not abandoned in adulthood, it is institutionalized. The state becomes a parent, the brand becomes a caregiver, the expert becomes a stand-in for conscience. And we, like good children, sit quietly, nodding along, mistaking emotional reassurance for personal empowerment. But beneath the surface, the emotional contract remains unchanged. Don't upset the mother. Don't ask the wrong questions. Don't grow too fast or too far. This isn't freedom. It's psychological regression, dressed up as civic harmony. And here lies the deeper fear, that obedience is not the result of strength or virtue, but the result of having never emotionally separated from the need to be protected. That we've mistaken sedation for peace and loyalty for love. But what if breaking away, emotionally, ideologically, even existentially, is not betrayal, but maturation? What if real peace doesn't feel like comfort, but like crisis? Because to truly grow up means to confront the silence where the mother's voice once was. It means facing the void without reaching for a surrogate to fill it. And if we're ready to do that, we must ask the next question. Who benefits from our desire to remain children? And what happens when we finally choose to grow up? There is a thought that haunts the margins of the psyche, a forbidden, quiet rage that flickers in the dark and then vanishes before it can be named. It's the thought we're trained to exile, the one we hide even from ourselves. What if I resent the one who loved me most? From the outside it sounds cruel, ungrateful, even pathological. But buried beneath the surface of our civility is a truth that ancient myth, depth psychology, and existential philosophy have all circled without flinching, that true freedom requires a fracture with the hand that once fed you. Friedrich Nietzsche called it the revaluation of all values, the act of smashing the inherited idols we didn't choose, yet were told to worship. For him, the Übermensch wasn't someone who destroyed traditions just for the sake of rebellion, but someone who had the courage to outgrow them. Someone who could step beyond the morality of the herd, even when the herd looked like home. Carl. Jung mapped a similar terrain with his concept of individuation, the psychological journey of becoming whole. But individuation demands a descent, a confrontation with the unconscious, a severing from the parental psyche that shaped us, not out of hatred, not out of rebellion, but because the child must symbolically kill the parent in order to become fully themselves. And this is where the tension lives, between gratitude and suffocation, between loyalty and latency, between who we were shaped to be and who we are still becoming. The Greeks understood this tension in the myth of Demeter and Persephone. Persephone, the daughter, is taken to the underworld by Hades. Her mother, Demeter, the goddess of harvest and life, mourns her loss so violently that the world stops growing. It is only through Persephone's return that spring resumes. At first glance, it seems like a tragedy interrupted by a reunion, but look deeper. Persephone's descent into the underworld is not just abduction, it is initiation. She returns not as a girl, but as a queen. She does not come back to stay in the garden forever, but to rule the realm of death for half the year. She lives in both worlds now. because she left the maternal paradise behind. The myth conceals a truth too painful to name, that the eternal spring offered by the mother is also a kind of imprisonment. And growing up means wintering, facing cold truths, descending into darkness, and choosing identity over comfort. This is the real trauma of awakening. Not that we were betrayed, but that the very person who cared for us most also stood, unknowingly, in the way of our becoming. And now we're left with guilt for needing distance, for wanting autonomy, for quietly resenting the very presence that once gave us life. But resentment, in this light, is not a moral failure. It's a signal, a flare shot into the sky of the psyche, warning that the soul is ready for more, that comfort has become confinement, that love has become an obligation, that the womb has become a wall, and this is where many people stop. They feel the guilt, the internal resistance, the fear of being seen as heartless or broken, and they retreat. They collapse back into the role of the grateful child, forever orbiting the gravitational pull of the one who cared. But those who persist, those who walk through the guilt instead of avoiding it, discover something radical. That behind the resentment is not hate, but the first spark of selfhood, the beginning of a new center of gravity, a self no longer defined by reflection, but by emergence. To cross this threshold is to betray the psychological contract of childhood, but to refuse is to remain incomplete. And so the forbidden thought becomes the sacred one. I love you, but I must outgrow you. I honor you, but I cannot obey you. I thank you, but I must leave you. This isn't abandonment. It's transformation. Because the mother is not the enemy. But if we never leave her shadow, we will never see the light that is uniquely ours. You may look in the mirror and see an adult, a body aged by time, clothed by choice, moving through the world with the illusion of autonomy. But somewhere behind, the eyes beneath the language and logic, is a rhythm that never changed. The heartbeat of a child circling the same crib of early need, the same ache for safety, the same pattern of reaching for comfort, only now it wears different faces. What if we never truly left? Psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan described something called the mirror stage, that moment in infancy when the child first sees themselves as a complete image, a coherent whole. But it's fiction, a hallucination of unity. Because inside, the child is fragmented, still dependent on the gaze of the mother to feel real. This illusion of selfhood becomes the template we carry forward. We perform the role of the independent adult, but we're still waiting for someone else to tell us we exist. This gap, between the image and the inner chaos, becomes fertile ground for manipulation. Because a psyche built on borrowed reflections will always need another mirror, a leader, a lover, a cause, a product. Anything to say, you are okay now, you are safe now, you are not alone. Freud called it repetition compulsion. The unconscious drive to recreate unresolved traumas in new forms, hoping this time the story will end differently. It's not just about abusive relationships or bad decisions. It's about something deeper, how early emotional imprinting becomes the blueprint of how we relate to power, love, and truth. Insecure attachment isn't just a psychological diagnosis. It's an economic strategy, a political currency, a spiritual market. Because a person trained from infancy to equate love with compliance will be easy to sell to, easy to scare, easy to lead. Think about it. Why do so many adults seek romantic partners who parent them? Why do people revere strongman leaders as if they were protective fathers? Why does ideology feel more like belonging than belief? These aren't isolated glitches in culture. They are symptoms of a much deeper software, one written long before we could speak, when crying summoned rescue and stillness earned reward. The real question isn't, why are people so irrational? It's, why wouldn't they be? If your nervous system was shaped in a home where love was inconsistent or conditional, your adult mind may consciously crave freedom, but your body will crave the patterns it recognizes. Not because they're good, but because they're familiar. This is how the past becomes power. A child who feels safest when quiet learns to keep their opinions to themselves at work. A teenager who was rewarded for obedience grows into a voter who trusts authority over evidence. A society raised on pacifying media becomes allergic to discomfort, mistaking disagreement for danger. The ghost of the crib is everywhere. It's in the influencer's soft voice, mimicking the mother's coo. In the marketing slogan that promises you're special, chosen, cared for. In the political speech that paints the world as too complex, too dangerous. But don't worry, we'll take care of you. These aren't appeals to logic. They are lullabies. And the most dangerous part? We like it, because it feels good to be cared for, to be told we're safe, to outsource responsibility to someone who seems stronger, smarter, or more certain. But every time we do, we reinforce the original wound. That comfort matters more than truth, that dependence is safer than growth, and that maturity is too painful to pursue. What happens when millions of adults are governed by the psyche of frightened children? We don't just get bad leaders. We need them. We create them. Because the unresolved child within us demands it. This is not a condemnation. It's a reckoning. Because if we don't recognize how the past shapes our perception of power, we will continue to seek liberation from the very chains we clutch. And the child who never left will go on ruling the adult who never arrived. At some point, the hunt must end. Not because the mother has been found, punished, or praised, but because we realize she was never the final target. The world we projected, her onto, lovers, leaders, gods, enemies, was always just a stage for a deeper conflict. The real struggle was not against her, but against the part of ourselves that still believed we were incomplete without her. Jung once wrote that he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. For those willing to descend into the unconscious, this is the moment the story reverses. We no longer chase the ghost of comfort. We confront the terrain of our own psyche. And what we find is far more terrifying and liberating than any external authority. We find her within us. This is the paradox. You do not escape the mother by rejecting her. You escape her by becoming her, not in form, but in function. Not in repeating her faults, but in owning her archetype. The nurturer, the protector, the witness, the one who sees, holds, and guides. Every time we outsource these roles to someone else, we remain children waiting for rescue. Every time we reclaim them, we mature. Jung's concept of the anima, the feminine aspect within the male psyche, is more than poetic metaphor. It's a psychological key. The anima isn't just emotion or intuition. It's the internalized maternal image, both feared and longed for. To reject her is to remain fractured. To integrate her is to become whole. But integration is not indulgence. It's a confrontation. We must walk into the shadow of our unmet needs, not to erase them, but to meet them with new hands, our own. That part of you still craving unconditional love, still afraid to be alone, still scanning the world for signs of approval. She will never be satisfied by someone else. And she doesn't need to be. She needs you. The mask you've spent years trying to tear off, the image of the controlling mother, the distant father, the failing world, when peeled away, reveals something both devastating and beautiful. Your own face. Because the parts of us we most recent are often the ones we were never allowed to express. The overprotective voice? It was once your fear. The manipulative guilt? It was once your longing. The silence? It was once your survival. And now, in the ruins of projection, you stand alone with the truth. No one is coming, but no one needs to, because you are already here. This realization is not soft or sentimental, it's surgical. It cuts away the fantasy of rescue, and reveals the anatomy of real power, responsibility. When you become the mother you never had, the one who sees your wounds and stays, who sets boundaries without punishment, who comforts without control, you stop waiting. You stop obeying. You stop reenacting. This is the final rebellion. It's not loud. It's not public. It's not a revolution that needs followers or flags. It's quieter than that, more dangerous than that, because once you no longer need to be comforted into compliance, you cannot be controlled. Once you meet your own needs, propaganda loses its bait. Ideology loses its grip. The world loses its power to parent you, and you begin to live. This is not the end of pain. It's the end of illusion. The illusion that wholeness exists somewhere else, that healing is a transaction, that freedom is something you must be granted. It's not. It's something you must become. The child searched for the mother. The adult reconstructs her, and the awakened one becomes her, not as a mirror, but as a source, as the one who, in finally embracing the mother within, births themselves at last. There comes a point in every inward journey where a final illusion must die, not an enemy to defeat, not a trauma to heal, but a dependency to release. The mother, whether she existed in the arms of a woman, in the ideals of a religion, or in the safety of a belief system, was never just a person. She was a symbol of refuge, of protection, of permanence, and no matter how old we become, some part of us continues to kneel before her ghost. This is not a weakness. It is human. The longing to be held, to be known without effort, to be soothed without words. These are the echoes of our earliest selves. But left unchecked, they become a prison. A mind that cannot stand alone will always return to the familiar, even when the familiar is the source of its suffering. The symbolic death of the mother is not an act of violence, it is an act of maturity. Not the rejection of love, but the transformation of it. We let go not because we hate her, but because we finally understand. No one else can carry the responsibility of our existence. No one else can provide meaning for us without also taking away our agency. And the moment we demand the world mother, us, we give up the right to govern ourselves. This is where sovereignty begins, not in rebellion but in release. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. But what is attachment really? It's not just craving. It's clinging to the idea that something or someone else holds the key to your peace. When we grieve the mother, we grieve that illusion. The pain is not in her loss. The pain is in realizing she was never supposed to complete us. She was supposed to begin with us, and now we must finish what she started. In Stoic philosophy, the ideal human is self-commanding. He does not avoid emotion, but he does not serve it. He does not rely on external validation to know what is right. He understands that fortune, comfort, praise, these are not his to control. But his reactions are, his interpretations are, his integrity is. To let the mother die is to let the inner child grow up, to stop asking, when will I be safe, and start asking, what must I do, even if I never feel safe again? The hero's journey always ends here, not in triumph, but in solitude. In the quiet, realization that no one is coming, and that this is not a tragedy, it is a birth. In existential thought, this is called individuation. The self becomes whole not by merging with others, but by discovering its own form. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the self with a capital S. Not the ego, not the role we play, but the being that emerges when all false selves are burned away. It is not afraid of abandonment because it no longer sees love as possession. It no longer sees comfort as the goal of life. It sees life itself as sacred, even in its silence. Reframing love is the final act of freedom. Love, real love, is not dependency. It is not the erasure of difference. It is the respect for reality as it is. To love someone, or something, without needing them to fulfill you, is the highest form of strength. To care without clinging, to give without collapsing. This is the love the child could not comprehend. But the adult must. So we left the cathedral, the place of sacred memory, of unspoken prayers, of first hopes and ancient wounds. We step out, not with bitterness, but with reverence, for everything she gave, for everything she couldn't, and most of all, for the truth that we are not empty in her absence. We are finally unburdened. To be born again is not to be remade. It is to see that you were never missing to begin with, that you were not abandoned, that you are not unworthy. You were simply waiting for your own permission to begin. And now, you have it. The death of the mother is not the end of love. It is the beginning of real love. Love without captivity. Love without illusion. Love that says, I see you, but I do not need you to save me. You will never find peace by returning to the past. You will never find wholeness by seeking out another to complete you. The story ends and begins when you stop looking for the mother, when you stand where she once stood, and in doing so, become the origin you were searching for all along.